I think the next thing to do likely is to talk about what's happened since Trump has been elected and the fact that, as mentioned earlier, he's rampaging around like a bull in a china shop and suggests that Canada is such a weak country now and such a weak and useless country, all things considered, that for all intents and purposes, it might as well be, as a totality, the 51st state because it has no use in existing on its own and it's parasitical on the US. And then on top of that, which is already quite something, he's added these immense tariffs. It's clear that he's not particularly happy with the manner in which Canada is governed. It's not exactly obvious what his end game is, but it's certainly
obvious.
Okay, well, tell us what you think Trump is doing and why you think elaborate on how we've set ourselves up to be the recipient of his peculiar largesse.
Yeah, sure. Well, I wrote a piece which possibly you can put on a link during this thing called We're All Economic Nationalists Now. And the reason I used that was that it's a phrase for strategic U-turns, coined by Milton Friedman.
Right.
In the late 60s.
The darling of the free market.
The darling of the free market, because he famously said in the late 60s, we're all Keynesians now. So he spent 20 years fighting Keynes, and then when there's a crisis with Nixon and they had to respond to it with a bunch of new monetary and fiscal structures, he said, well, we're all Keynesians
right.
now.
And Keynes was an interventionist compared to Friedman.
And Friedman was at war with him.
Right.
He represents the opposite. And what he's fundamentally saying is that economics is a social science, not a natural science. And you have to tune your behavior to the facts on the ground. Mm-hmm. So if you are a Friedmanite in this contemporary reality, then attune. Period. And so,
like to the realities of the new ownership doctrines in the knowledge economy,
the nature of the geopolitical era of strategic behavior. So, responding very specifically to what you said, the question you asked on Trump, when you go to an intangibles economy, when you're producing economy, you trade on a principle called comparative advantage.
Yeah, lay that out.
Well, comparative advantage, it was done by David Ricardian comparative advantage, that says you may produce cups better than me and even saucers better than me. Mm-hmm. But if I can produce saucers comparatively better than I produce cups relative to you, if we trade, we're both better off. Mm-hmm. So it's a principle of comparative advantage.
Okay, lay that out one more time because everyone needs to understand
So
this.
if you make a cup for $2
yeah.
and a saucer for $1, and I make a cup for $3 and a saucer for $2, now I'm going to mess up my logic here, I'm absolutely worse than you on both, but I'm comparatively better on cups because I'm only 50% more expensive rather than 100% more expensive. Right. So if I ship you cups and you ship me saucers, that will rise the tide of everybody. So everybody has an incentive to trade on physical goods based on comparative advantage.
Yeah. So I can offer you my best and you can offer me your best, and in consequence, even if my best isn't as good as yours, we're both going to get wealthier.
You trade on Ricardian comparative advantage.
Okay, that's a material-based
That's a
economy.
Core principle of liberalizing trade. Now, when you go to an ideas economy, which is based on a principle of restriction and monopoly, somebody wants to be the landlord and somebody has to be the tenant. And you can compete on absolute advantage, or you can be the landlord 10 out of 10 times. It's not a cooperative system anymore. It's a rivalrous system. Mm-hmm. And what that means is if you're a big, strong guy,
you get everything.
You do what's called strategic behavior. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're experiencing right now. And the piece I wrote on We're All Economic Nationalists Now, I talk about the strategic behavior, Trump 1.0. Biden took all of those things and added many more, which you can read it and I won't go into them now, but he did many very substantial strategic elements of behavior.
Trump first, then Biden.
Biden
in
did
relationship
more than
to
Trump.
Canada.
Yeah, and then Trump took it to a whole nother level very recently. And so it's an era of strategic behavior, which means it's not a cooperative-based system. And Canada believed in the multilateral rules-based order. This is a shared global project. And my exhortation is this is an absolute advantage era that leads to strategic behavior. And if you don't focus on being reasonably sovereign, reasonably strong, you become the one they pick on. And it's, it's very profitable for a nation state to pick on a weak state, especially one that has some good assets to pick. And wither Canada in the era of Trump. Here we go.
So the virtualization of ownership has radically changed the nature of the international social contract.
100%. And what happened was...
And we still don't really understand that. And that's part of the reason we've been so susceptible to Trump's maneuvers 100%. In the last 2 months.
And we also thought that it was a multilateral rules-based system where control and ownership of strategic assets doesn't matter. And we're learning a very hard lesson that who owns it and controls it is really
the only thing that matters.
It really matters a lot, yeah. And so we're paying a very, very sorry price for that inattention to our economic policies. Were giving tens of billions of dollars to foreign battery companies where we had no domestic control, no very small domestic value add. And now, and what was happening to Canada, and the US played a very clever game, and Western Europe played along, and the Southeast Asians got really good at this, that they said, if you want to play in the production economy, leg number 1, you got to sign up to these rules on leg number 2, which is the restrictions.
So we own all the ideas.
Well, if you get really good, you can start to own some too, but you got to be very high functioning, of which the Western Europeans and the Southeast Asians are. And now what America's doing is saying, just kidding, I want the rules for this intangibles economy, and I'm now even going to do more strategic behavior and pull the rug out under the production economy, which is a form of neo-feudalism, that you have to pay a tax to the sovereign, and there's an aristocracy, and then there's a non-aristocracy. Well, we're going. That's what I mean by Puerto Rico without a passport. Yeah. And here we are.